November 18, 1961, Las Vegas. The Sands Hotel. The showroom is empty now. 2,000 seats where 2,000 people sat laughing and applauding just an hour ago. Now silence. The smell of cigarette smoke and expensive perfume still lingers in the air. Dean Martin walks down the corridor toward his dressing room. His tuxedo jacket is draped over his arm. His bow tie hangs loose. Another show done. Another night in Vegas. He's tired but satisfied. The crowd was good tonight. They always are. He opens the dressing room door, stops. 3 men are sitting inside. 2 of them he doesn't recognize. Large men, the kind who don't need to say much because their presence says everything. They stand by the door like statues, hands folded, eyes watching. The 3rd man sits in Dean's chair, in front of Dean's mirror, smoking Dean's cigarettes. Sam Giancana, the most dangerous man in America, the boss of the Chicago outfit, the man who controls half of Las Vegas without ever appearing on a single deed. The man who has politicians, judges, and movie stars in his pocket. The man who smiles while he orders men killed. He's smiling now. Dino. Giancana spreads his arms like they're old friends. Come in, come in. We need to talk. Dean doesn't flinch, doesn't hesitate. He walks into his own dressing room like nothing is wrong. Like the most powerful mobster in the country isn't sitting in his chair uninvited. He walks to the bar, pours himself a bourbon, takes his time, lets the silence stretch. Sam, his voice is calm, easy. To what do I owe the pleasure? Giancana's smile widens, but his eyes stay cold. They're always cold. Sit down, Dean. We have business to discuss. And what happened in that dressing room over the next 20 minutes would define who Dean Martin really was. Not the singer, not the entertainer, the man. The man who looked the devil in the eye and said no. To understand why. Sam Giancana was in Dean Martin's dressing room that night. You need to understand what Las Vegas was in 1961, and you need to understand the dangerous game. Everyone in Hollywood was playing Las Vegas in 1961 was not a city. It was a colony, an outpost of organized crime dressed up in neon lights and showgirl feathers. The casinos were owned on paper by legitimate businessmen. But behind every deed, behind every contract, behind every handshake was the mob. Chicago controlled the Sands. New York had interests in the Flamingo. Kansas City had the Tropicana. The men who really owned Las Vegas never appeared in photographs. They operated in shadows. They smiled at senators and buried bodies in the desert. Sam Giancana was the king of this shadow world. Born Salvatore Giancana in Chicago's Little Italy in 1908, he rose through the ranks of organized crime with a combination of charm and brutality that terrified even his allies. By the age of 20, he had been arrested dozens of times. By 30, he was running numbers for the outfit. By 50, he was the boss. He could make you laugh at dinner and have you killed before dessert. He dated famous actresses. He golfed with politicians. He had connections in the CIA. They actually approached him to help assassinate Fidel Castro. The Kennedys used his influence to secure Union votes in the 1960 election. Frank Sinatra introduced him to Jack Kennedy personally. Sam Giancana moved through the highest levels of American society like a shark through water, smiling, dangerous, always watching, and everyone who mattered owed him something. Frank Sinatra was one of those stars. Frank and Sam were close, too close. Frank introduced Sam to Jack Kennedy. Frank let Sam use his Palm Springs home. Frank thought he could play in both worlds, the legitimate world of entertainment and the shadow world of organized crime. He was wrong, but that's another story. The Rat Pack performed at the Sands regularly. Frank, Dean, Sammy, Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop, they packed the showroom every night. They made the Sands the most famous casino in the world. And the men who really owned the Sands wanted to make sure they controlled the Golden Geese. Frank was already theirs. He owed them favors. He needed their help. He was compromised. Sammy Davis Jr. stayed quiet. He had enough problems being a black man in a white man's world. He didn't need mob trouble on top of everything else. But Dean Martin was different. Dean took their money for performing. He was polite, professional, but he never got close. Never accepted favors. Never let them do anything for him that would create a debt. And in the world of organized crime, a man without debts was a man they couldn't control. That made Sam Giancana nervous. And when Sam Giancana got nervous, he had conversations. Dean sat down across from Giancana. The two large men remained by the door. The message was clear. This conversation would happen whether Dean wanted it or not. Giancana leaned forward. His voice was friendly, almost warm. "Dino, I've always liked you. You know that, right? You're talented. You're smart. You're good for business." He gestured around the dressing room. "We've been good to you here. The Sands treats you well, doesn't it?" Dean sipped his bourbon. No complaints. "Good, good," Giancana nodded. "But here's the thing, Dean. We're like a family here. Frank understands that. Sammy understands that. Everyone understands that. But you," he tilted his head, "you're still outside, still keeping your distance. That makes people nervous." "I'm not trying to make anyone nervous, Sam. I know. Giancana waved his hand. "You're just being Dean, Mr. Cool, Mr. Independent. I get it. I respect it." Even his eyes hardened. But respect only goes so far. At some point, a man has to choose. He's either with us or he's not. He's family or he's a stranger. Dean set down his glass. His face showed nothing, but inside, he understood exactly what was happening. This was the moment every man in his position feared. The moment the mob came calling. The moment you had to decide who you really were. "What exactly are you asking, Sam?" Giancana smiled. That cold, calculating smile. "I'm asking for loyalty, Dean. Nothing more, nothing less. You do some things for us. We do some things for you. You need a problem solved? We solve it. You need someone taken care of? We take care of it. In return, when we need something, you're there for us. That's how family works." He leaned back, spread his arms. "We'll protect your career. We'll protect your money. We'll protect your family. Nobody touches Dean Martin without answering to us. All you have to do is be loyal. Be ours." The two men by the door watched Dean with flat, expressionless eyes. Giancana watched with that smile, waiting confident. He had made this offer to dozens of men. They always said yes. What choice did they have? Dean stood up slowly, walked to the bar, poured another bourbon. The clink of ice against glass was the only sound. Then he turned around, and what he said next changed everything. "Sam, I respect you. I mean that. You've built something impressive. You've got power that most men can't even imagine. And I appreciate that you're offering me protection. That's generous." He took a step closer. His voice was still calm, still easy. But something had shifted, something harder underneath. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not for sale. Never have been. Never will be." Giancana's smile flickered. Just for a moment. Nobody talked to him like this. Nobody. "Dean, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly." Dean cut him off. His voice was still soft, but there was steel in it now. "You want to own me? You want me in your pocket like Frank? Like half the politicians in Washington? You want to be able to call in favors? You want me to owe you?" He shook his head slowly. "That's not going to happen." Giancana's face hardened. The warmth vanished. What remained was the man who had ordered dozens of murders. The man who had built an empire on fear. "Be very careful, Dean. This city can be dangerous for a man without friends." Dean smiled. That famous, easy Dean Martin smile, the one that made women swoon and men trust him. But there was nothing soft about it now. "I've got friends, Sam, 2,000 of them every night. They're sitting in those seats out there, paying money to see me. That's my family. That's my protection." He took a step closer. "And you know what the difference is between your family and mine? Mine doesn't fear me. They love me, and love is stronger than fear. It always has been." Giancana stood up abruptly. The two men by the door tensed. The air crackled with danger. "You think love is going to protect you? You think applause is going to stop a bullet?" Dean didn't back down, didn't blink. He looked Giancana directly in the eyes. "Maybe not. Maybe you could have me killed tomorrow. Maybe you could end my career with a phone call. You've got that power. I know that." He set down his bourbon. "But you can't buy me. You can't own me. Because I'm a poor kid from Steubenville, Ohio, and we have a rule where I come from." He leaned in. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "If you owe a man something, that man controls you. So I don't owe anyone anything ever. I'd rather be poor. I'd rather be dead. But I won't be owned. Not by you, not by anyone." The silence stretched. Seconds felt like hours. The two men by the door waited for Giancana's signal. One word from him, and this could end very differently. And then Sam Giancana laughed. A real laugh, deep and genuine. He shook his head, still laughing, and the tension in the room cracked like ice in spring. "This is why I like you, Dino. This is exactly why." He wiped his eyes. "Every man in this town bows down. Every man scrambles for my approval. But you stand there and tell me to go to hell with a smile on your face?" He walked toward Dean. The two men by the door relaxed slightly. Giancana stopped right in front of Dean. Two men from the same world, two Italian kids who had clawed their way up from nothing. "All right, Dean, you win. You're not for sale. I accept that." He extended his hand. "But we're friends, yes? At least that. Business associates who respect each other." Dean looked at the hand. He knew what it meant. He knew what it didn't mean. Friends, Sam, but not family. Never family. Friends can walk away. Family can't. Giancana laughed again. Shook his head in admiration. "You're something else, Dino. You really are." He shook Dean's hand firmly. "All right, friends, it is. But remember this conversation. Remember that I gave you a choice. Most men don't get that." He walked to the door. His men opened it. He paused in the doorway. Turned back. "Your courage is impressive, Dean, but courage has a price. One day, that price might come due." Dean picked up his bourbon, raised it slightly. "When it does, I'll pay it." With my head held high, Giancana smiled one last time. Then he was gone. The door closed. The room was silent. Dean stood alone in his dressing room. He drained the bourbon in one long swallow. His hand was shaking slightly, the only sign of what that conversation had cost him. He had just told the most dangerous man in America to go to hell. He had refused protection that most men would kill for. He had painted a target on his back with his own words, but he had also kept something more valuable, something that couldn't be bought or sold or traded. His freedom. What happened? After that night tells you everything. You need to know about Dean Martin. Frank Sinatra's relationship with Giancana eventually destroyed him. When the Kennedys decided to distance themselves from the mob, they cut Frank loose. Bobby Kennedy's Justice Department investigated him. The FBI tapped his phones. The association that Frank thought would make him powerful made him vulnerable instead. Sammy Davis Jr. had his own troubles. The mob used his gambling debts to control him. He spent years under their thumb, doing what they asked because he had no choice, but Dean stayed clean. He performed in Vegas for decades. He made his money. He lived his life, and nobody ever owned him. Giancana never bothered him again. Some say it was respect. Some say it was calculation. Dean was too valuable to destroy and too stubborn to control. Either way, the result was the same. Dean Martin walked through the most corrupt city in America and came out the other side untouched. In 1975, Sam Giancana was shot 7 times in the basement of his home. Someone he trusted had betrayed him. He died the way he had lived, violently, surrounded by shadows. Dean Martin heard the news on television. He was alone in his living room, the same room where he had spent so many nights thinking about choices and consequences. He poured a bourbon, raised it to the screen. "You were right, Sam. Courage has a price. But so does fear. Looks like your bill came due first." He drank slowly, thinking about that night in the dressing room. Thinking about the choice he made. The choice that kept him free while everyone else got trapped. There is a lesson in this story. Freedom isn't free. It costs something. Sometimes it costs comfort. Sometimes it costs safety. Sometimes it costs everything you have. But freedom is the only thing worth having that can't be taken from you, only given away. Dean Martin understood this. When the most powerful criminal in America offered him protection, partnership, belonging, Dean said no. Not because he was brave, not because he was foolish, because he knew that the moment you accept something you can't repay, you become property. You become owned. I'm not for sale. For words that could have gotten him killed, for words that kept him free for the rest of his life. The king of cool wasn't cool because he didn't care. He was cool because he cared about the right things. He cared about his integrity, his independence, his ability to look in the mirror and see a man who belonged to no one in a city built on corruption. In an industry built on compromise, Dean Martin stayed clean, stayed free, stayed himself. That's not just cool, that's courage. Real courage. The kind that doesn't flinch when the devil offers you a deal. This is Dean Martin, The Untold Legacy. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done in that room? Sometimes one word changes everything, and sometimes that word is no. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear that freedom is worth more than safety. And make sure you're subscribed, because in our next video, we reveal the final conversation between Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra, the night Frank left in tears. Until then, keep swinging, Polly.